Right now, people are using USDC or USDT. 70% of all crypto transactions by value are happening in one of those entities, which is like tragic from the Cypherpunk perspective, because those entities are just receipts circulating on chain representing deposits in the fiat system. Gold ETFs like weren't created until 2000. There's a reason they created them there. It was so that they could create paper gold. And there's strong arguments that there's, 100 to 1 paper than there is to physical. And that's why they've been able to print 97% of the money, but we haven't seen a 30x rise in the gold price because all of that gold is not actually there. One way or another, they figure out how to manipulate the system to take advantage of us and to continue the Ponzi as long as they possibly can.
Mouse click money, press a button.
No, it's worse. We went from $800 billion in 2008, 17 years ago. And we're at 34 trillion. So my math is 97% of all money has been printed in the last 18 years. The corruption comes from the fact that the money is subjective and it's enforced through social consensus, which turns into political consensus, which turns into corruption, kleptocracy, etc. And the bankers are effectively proof of stake, and interest goes back to the bankers, so they get more proof of stake, and then they control the system more and more over time, not less and less. What we're doing is we're trying to develop a system, not for the sake of developing the system, but to create one that's completely independent from fiat. And that allows you to defect from fiat and never have to go back, no matter the macro environment. That is fundamentally the point of Quai.
Welcome back to another episode of Cypherpunk'd, where we explore money's history, crypto's future, and Web3's role in advancing human rights, freedom, and digital liberty. Today's guest is Dr. K, co-founder and CTO of Quai Network, a scalable merged mine proof-of-work blockchain. We are going to do a series on the Quai protocol, and this is our very first episode. So welcome to the show, Dr. K.
Appreciate you having me.
So what is Quai? Tell us about Quai.
So Quai is designed to be a decentralized global monetary system. And to unwrap that just a little bit, when we look at a monetary system, it actually has 3 components. You need a store value, you need a unit of account, and you need a medium of exchange. So in the current sort of crypto ecosystem, Bitcoin is servicing as really a store value, and its kind of role as digital gold. Stable tokens that are dollar-based and typically custodial, like USDT, are kind of serving as the unit of account. And in terms of medium of exchange, it's really probably just Monero. And so those are all disparate systems. They're fragmented in terms of their interoperability and properties. And so we're taking all of those things, putting them into one system, and doing it on a scalable proof of work network. So what the sort of mechanism is this hierarchy of merge mine blockchains, as you say, but what it can do is scale TPS with demand.
Can you explain what TPS is for people?
Transactions per second. So Bitcoin does somewhere between, say, 5 and 7. Ethereum right now does, say, between 20 to 40. And what we can do is 50,000 plus transactions per second, but we're not sort of taking shortcuts in centralizing nodes to accomplish that, or using proof of stake. We're doing it with proof of work, and we're doing it in a way where you can have tens of thousands of nodes participate globally in the system.
You say that Quai is 10,000 times more energy efficient per transaction than something like Bitcoin. Walk us through how merge mining and how that's possible, how that makes sense. Can you explain and unpack it a little bit? I know one thing to maybe talk about is this, known as the trilemma, the blockchain trilemma. How do you guys approach that?
Well, let's maybe just unpack the 10,000 times more efficient claim.
Okay,
That basically just comes from the fact that if Quai ends up having the same hash rate or energy expenditure as Bitcoin per second. But it's able to do 50,000 transactions per second rather than 5. The amount of energy per transaction is going to be 1/10,000th, right? And so when we're looking at the system of sort of digital money, what you ultimately want to do is provide the greatest value for the lowest cost. And implicit in the cost, if it comes through an inflationary subsidy or transaction fee payment, has to do with how much you have to pay to get security, i.e. worked finalization in the network, amortized over the total number of transactions going through the network, which is the cost. So if you could raise the throughput, you can lower the cost per transaction while maintaining the same level of security.
Some interesting rabbit holes there. I know a lot of proof of stake systems will make the argument that they're 500 million times more energy efficient per transaction. So, like, I guess that's not the only metric that matters. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't actually think proof of stake consensus is really consensus. It's social consensus. It's not economic consensus.
Okay.
So if we look at proof of stake, and there's a lot you can go down this rabbit hole, but to give you the short form, you suffer from the proof of stake or nothing at stake problem during a fork.
Yeah.
You have economics, which are plutocratic and centralize, interest to capital holders over time. So you get a less and less decentralized system with time.
It's kind of how the current status quo works. The current system is
the bankers.
Proof of stake,
the bankers are effectively proof of stake, and like interest goes back to the bankers, so they get more proof of stake.
Yeah.
And then they like control the system more and more over time, not less and less.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is proof of stake isn't inherently immutable, because as far back as you can sort of coordinate a plurality of stakers, you can go and change the ledger for effectively zero fee.
Kind of seen that with stuff like Solana. Sometimes something happens, the network shuts down, and like they'll get the 10 people running the nodes in the same room, and hey, we'll fix this, we'll do that. It just you seriously lose elements of decentralization. There's like no doubt about that.
Right. And with something like Bitcoin, which is, still sort of the canonical work-based system, like you go 5-10 blocks deep in the system, you have a very high degree of confidence, like that's not ever going to get reversed.
When we say high, we mean like 99.9999%, something like that.
So there's different elements of it, right? There's the sort of statistical element of understanding, has 51% of the network voted sort of 4 transactions in a block, and that kind of happens around 6 blocks in Bitcoin. And then there's the economic element, which is, can somebody attack the chain profitably given the amount that's being settled?
And the answer to that is really like, fuck no. So like there is the element of 51%, but like to profitably attack the chain, I mean, it's like, you very quickly, if you can solve a block, like that's worth like almost a lot. It's worth a lot, right? So
it's like 150,000. So in 6 blocks, you're settling, on the very sort of first order approximation of the cost of an attack, you're settling $1 million.
Now you don't think about it. I mean, if that's 6 blocks, that's 3.25 Bitcoin per block plus transaction fees. That's significantly more. We're talking about half.
Oh yeah, it's 100. It's 100K. We're talking. So
when you say 100K? Yeah.
So 2 million these days. It's about 2 million.
So hold on, 3.25. That would be 325K. Yeah, roughly about 2 million, like you said.
It's about 2 million in 6 blocks.
So if you're able to do that, I mean, it's got to be like.
So most transactions can settle relatively quickly on Bitcoin. But it does still have a finite economic bandwidth. So if you were to say like have an oil tanker and you're going to pay for that oil tanker in Bitcoin, that oil tanker could be worth $500 million.
Yeah.
Right. So technically you shouldn't like allow the offloading of that oil or that like ship to depart or whatever it is where that transaction's happening until you're $500 million in. Yeah. Right. So that wouldn't be like 6 Bitcoin blocks. That would be.
But you'd also have to, coordinate that hash over a period of time. And
that'd be
there's an energy cost to that. It's not like it's just like.
Yeah.
Not only are you giving up the rewards you could be getting from being an honest participant, but you also have to pay like an insane energy cost, which. I don't know the math on it. It's an extraordinary sum of.
Yeah. So that's, again, first order approximation. Yeah. There's some form of economic bandwidth, and you can say, okay, well, what capital requirement you would have to sort of get that hash, and you can make that your second order in your sort of approximation. But the point being is there's a concept of economic finalization where it becomes unprofitable to privately mine to do a double spend effectively.
Yeah.
and that exists, and you can get to more and more complex orders of approximations there, but fundamentally Bitcoin is economically like settling and then making a transaction immutable, which is then giving you assurance that no one's going to double spend, and it has some relationship to do with the size of the transaction. So not to like go too far down that rabbit hole, but that kind of is how it works. Yeah.
What other aspects of proof of work? We talk a little bit about energy and this idea of tying things to physics. Why do you feel that proof of work based systems are so superior to proof of stake?
Right. I think proof of stake systems really are social consensus. And if you look at our current system, it is also social consensus in terms of how the money is issued, how interest rates are determined. And that social consensus is ultimately enforced through politics, and that politics and political enforcement ultimately manifests as violence. Right. So when we ask like, what is the cost of having the dollar? I need to also ask, what is the cost of having our military?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. What is the cost of having, 750 bases around the world that like we support? What is the cost of having half of discretionary government spending every year going to the military?
It's insane. It really is.
Right.
I mean, a lot of it's probably fraud across the board, whether it's, with, military, but also in all this other stuff. I mean, I think Doge is unpacking that now. You're just really seeing like the breadth of the fraud, like of how they can just really steal value. If you're politically connected, I mean, your mother, your grandma, your uncle, your niece, your daughter, your wife are all on the boards of these NGOs, and you're sitting there, apportioning capital to the NGO and saying we're saving global warming, or we're saving the penguins, or we're doing this, and really it's just a giant kleptocracy, powered by the fiat system.
100%, right? So like the corruption comes from the fact that the money is subjective, and it's enforced through social consensus, which turns into political consensus, which turns into corruption, kleptocracy, etc. And I mean, it's just absolutely obvious and massive. Like if you go to DC,
oh, it's unbelievable what's going on.
There's like a couple places where you like step off a plane and you get this like weird feeling where you're like, this place is unnatural.
Yeah.
This place shouldn't exist. This is like incomportant with nature.
Mm-hmm.
There's two places where I get that feeling. One is Las Vegas and one is DC.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, because like you go to Las Vegas and you're like, it shouldn't be here because it's just completely artificial in the environment. And it's like pumping water out of the Colorado to like make this city work. But you can just intrinsically sense that it's not supposed to be there. And I get the same feeling when I walk around DC.
Yeah. DC's it's a wild place. It's almost dystopian in some ways. Like I was there during COVID, and I just like, I'm from Florida, and like we did the whole thing for like a week or two. We're like, oh, we'll stay inside for a week. And then our governor was like, yeah, we're just going to be free. Do what the fuck you want. And everywhere else was not that. It was like just total fucking dystopia for like years after, where like, people weren't allowed to leave their houses and all this crazy stuff. And I just remember being in DC and just like, I just couldn't believe the level of like George Orwell brainwashing that I witnessed when I was there. It was like, you weren't allowed to eat in a restaurant. So what happened, what people had done was they had essentially set up like indoor restaurants outside on the street. And like I'm outside, and we were like, no, you have to go into the indoor tent out there because we're not allowed to eat inside. And I'm like, you do realize that like it's 0 degrees out, and you guys just like close off this thing, and everybody's just inside of a tent. You're still like
inside,
but you're like inside, but like you're literally like on the street. So there's like rats and stuff running around. And like,
you're cold and you're still inside.
I'm like, what the fuck is happening? Like, I'm like, how do you guys put up with this? How do you deal with it? They're just like, no, you need to do this. You have to stay, blah, blah, blah. We're outside. And like, meanwhile, I'm looking over, I'm like, there's a fucking rat that's running along the gutter right there. Like, this is disgusting. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I just remember seeing these faces of Fauci, and they had like just a big face of him, like no neck, no nothing. It was like, and the sign said like, trust Fauci. And I'm like, what I felt like I was like in fucking Animal Farm. Like I felt like I was like in the book. Like, like the propaganda's just like right in my face. And like, I got no problem with people, doing whatever they want, wear a mask, kick your back.
Rough.
Fuck you.
The scientism.
Yeah. But that shit was wild. So like, I get exactly what you're saying. Like I just felt like I was in a Netflix fucking, TV series or something, like something Black Mirror episode or something. It was very creepy.
Yeah. I mean, I think COVID for a lot of people, because it was just so obvious that none of it made sense.
Yeah. It was just like a mass psychosis.
It was a mass psychosis, and it was an outcome of having a government that can artificially print money to support itself.
Yeah.
And having an administrative bureaucracy that can't or doesn't need to justify its existence.
Yeah.
Right. And so you get all of these like completely maladaptive outcomes, but it all stems from the money.
And they just printed
trillions of dollars.
I just talked with this Larry Lepard about this. It's like, the pace of the printing is just accelerating. It's like they made like 40 to 50% of all of the dollars that ever existed for like a century plus. They made them in like 12 months, like 12 to 24 months. It was
it's
mouse click money, press a button. And
no, it's worse. Yeah. So, I mean, we can have Jamie here double check me, but my numbers, as I recall them, is total M1 was 800 billion prior to the great financial crisis.
Yeah,
and to
.com.
paper that over, it went to 4 trillion. But then after COVID, it went to, I think it's like 34 or 35 trillion now.
It's insane.
So we went from $800 billion in 2008, 17 years ago.
Yeah.
And we're at 34 trillion. So my math is 97% of all money has been printed in the last 18 years.
Isn't that unfathomable? It is wild. You're not wrong. Yeah. I mean, and the dollar, I mean, it's lost like 99% of its purchasing power. And I think the most insidious thing about all of this, that like people kind of feel it, like you can, like my generation specifically can feel like I can't afford a house now. Like it's just so out of reach. Like it's, you know what I mean? Like our generation, a lot of people can really just feel that. And like things are not going down, they're costing more. And this disproportionately hurts the lowest income people that live paycheck to paycheck, like, because the last thing to rise after you print money is people's wages. That's like the last thing. Everything else has to trickle. The people who get access to the money first, who are closest to the fiat printers, they get to spend the money first and have more purchasing power. And this is what, I think the stat that I looked at is like the top 1% control 92% of all the value and wealth. I mean, and this is like since 1971 and the detachment from sound money, this has like exploded, and it's only getting worse and worse, and it's kind of scary. So this is why I think, sound money like Bitcoin, that store of value, is super important for people, right? And having other options, other experiments is important, right? Like every time the fiat experiment has been tried throughout human history, like it's pretty much ended in abject failure and misery for many people, right? So
yeah, I mean, I think the average age or lifespan of a fiat currency is like 23 years.
Yeah, I want to say like 50 years, but yeah, I mean, even so, we're approaching that point.
Well, no, I said average, right? So like, there's some longer like running experiments that technically like go longer than that.
Really, yeah.
I mean, if we look at the dollar, I would argue the dollar after 1971 is different than the dollar before 1971.
No doubt, it's not the same thing.
And the dollar after 1933 is different than the dollar before 1933.
You're not wrong.
Right. And the dollar before 1913 is not the same as the dollar after 1913. Right. So like if you look at that, right, I mean,
it's a slow boiling of the frog, and like, but at least until 1971, there was some attachment to real energy cost, real physics, real energy, right? Like some constraint on government cantillionaires and government bureaucrats.
Some very loose constraints.
Yes, correct, but it was better than no constraints, which we've seen is like just it's been insane. It's been terrible. I mean, like you go to that website and you look what the fuck has happened since 1971. You look at those graphs and you just see like just boom. It's just like the first 100 years everything's kind of pretty close, and then all of a sudden just like 1971, like since then is like the wealth income inequality just boom explodes for the poorest and the rich, and then all these other things,
like other metrics of like well-being and prosperity are just off a cliff.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's like it's undeniable, right? Like like that's why it's like what the fuck happened in 1971.
Well, I think one of the things that they've done very well, gold ETFs like weren't created until 2000.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason they created them there. Mm-hmm. It was so that they could create paper gold.
Yeah, so they could kind of stop the off ramps.
Fundamentally, like if Greenspan even talks about this, when he was in charge, his goal wasn't necessarily to keep CPI at 2%. His goal was to control the dollar relative to gold. And so the creation of the ETFs were to give them a mechanism by which they could better control the price of gold by creating paper gold, which they could detach from the physical supply.
Yeah, wow.
And so if you look at like how the LBMA is structured and the fractional reserving within the LBMA, again, there's strong arguments that there's 100 to 1 paper than there is to physical, and that's why they've been able to print 97% of the money, but we haven't seen a 30x rise in the gold price because all of that gold is not actually there. It is just notes that are trading with GLD that are completely unredeemable, right? So one way or another, they figure out how to manipulate the system to take advantage of us and like to continue the Ponzi like as long as they possibly can, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think, and again, this was the analysis that our listeners are going to have to watch my series with Larry Lepard, but his book's called The Big Print. It's a fantastic read, very easy for a layman to understand. But I think the crux of the book and the main message is like, the next crisis is around the corner, and you better believe the printers are going to be printing at a massive 10x probably what they printed last time. So expect that to happen. But let's get back to Quai a little bit. Talk to me a little bit more about the protocol philosophy. I know we've kind of talked about this off camera a little bit and on camera a little bit. But what is Quai, like the philosophical approach to Quai scaling as opposed to what something like Bitcoin is doing, right? Kind of like talking about scaling through layers, right? Like Lightning and other networks, layer 2s, layer 3s, potentially even. Quai is optimizing to do that on the L1. What drove this fundamental design choice?
I don't think that you can have a long-term sustainable proof of work system that doesn't have a unit of account as well as a store value, as well as a medium of exchange, all in one system.
When you say all in one system, do you mean all on the layer 1?
Yeah, not only on the layer 1, but on the same layer 1. So there's like a couple sort of issues with like proof of work systems, which is they need security, right? So to have security, they have to do work. To do work, they have to pay the miners. So they have to get that money from somewhere. So if you want to create a deflationary issuance model, eventually that issuance goes to zero. And so you need to supplant that ideally with transaction fees to offset the decrease in the inflationary supply. So the best way to generate revenue is to match supply with demand and create a system that can dynamically sort of increase supply when demand is there and thus maximize sort of revenue for the chain security, which is the revenue for the miners. And if you do that, you can have your inflation subsidy go down as fast as you have your transaction fees or your transaction revenue rather go up. So I don't have to have my fees go up. I can leave my fees like very low cost, but I can create significant revenue as long as I can increase the number of transactions that you're doing. And if you do that, then you can similarly decrease your inflationary subsidy as fast as you can increase your transaction revenue. But more importantly than the speed at which you can do that is you have something to supplant your inflationary revenue with transactions, but you're doing it at still low fees so that sort of everyone has access to the system and can participate. And it doesn't become like like a Swift only sort of banking system. It is a system where everybody can interact with it. Everybody can still, use it regardless of how many people and how big sort of the market cap gets. Like it still works transactionally for, small value transactions and remains a tool for everybody, not just like very wealthy people or custodians.
Interesting. Does Quai, like with the issuance of Quai, the inflation rate, does that change based on the demand for the network with the Quai token itself?
It does.
So so essentially, if there's more transaction fees, the issuance of Quai will go down to kind of supplant that. So it's not because like personally for me, when I think about like a money, I want to know what the inflation rate is, over time. And I think that's like, there's some level of fairness to that for people, which like if people are saving, like grandma right now is saving dollars, like she doesn't know that, government will just decide, hey, this COVID thing, and we're going to do this. We're going to print 50% of all the dollars and massively inflate away her savings. I think there's something to be said for having certainty to people so they understand, okay, this is the issuance. This is how it's going to be. What you're saying to me right now is that Quai, that can kind of change based off of, demand of the network, right? If the demand increases, the inflation goes down.
Yeah.
And the transaction fees will become more important.
So the design of money is that you need a good, what we call Gini coefficient. So that's
an interesting one. Paul, can you look that up, Gini coefficient, and we'll read the definition of that on Grok, because I think it's a pretty cool one. Most people have probably never heard that term.
It's a little bit of a Keynesian term, but basically what it's saying is that good money has sort of somewhat of like an even distribution, at least like a Poisson distribution. So like if it's too highly concentrated, it doesn't make good money because not everybody can use it. So you still want like a good sort of quote unquote fair distribution of money. And like what makes dollars a worse form of money is that, you said that, that thing you said earlier, like 1% of the people or whatever percentage are controlling like 92% of the wealth.
Yeah.
That's a very bad Gini coefficient.
Yeah. So here we go. The Gini coefficient is a statistical measure of inequality commonly used to assess income or wealth distribution within a population. It ranges from 0 to 1. 0 represents perfect equality. Everyone has the same income/wealth. 1 represents perfect inequality. One person has all the income wealth, others have none. The Gini coefficient is derived from the Lorenz curve, which plots the cumulative share of income divided by wealth against the cumulative share of the population, ordered from poorest to richest. Mathematically, it's expressed as G equals A divided by A plus B. Very interesting.
Yeah, well,
interesting thought experiment.
And the upshot of it is that to make good money, you need good distribution of the money. Because if one person has all the money, everybody else that doesn't want to use that money because like one person has it, right? So on that extreme, then if like 2 people have it, maybe you have like a slightly larger population that's like willing to consider that money. If 3 people have it, then it becomes bigger. And there's some like optimality where when you're sort of initial sort of distributing money, you want enough of it to go around so that enough people are bought into the system that like it circulates in the broadest possible population, right? That's one of the values of proof of work is that it creates this mechanism by which you can do distributions, and it has a degree of creating good Gini coefficients depending on how you do the supply issuance. Now, when you make the supply issuance sort of arbitrary on timeframes rather than growth, you get worse Gini coefficients. But what we're doing in Quai is we're basically saying we always want the supply of the token to grow at a rate that's sub the value of the network, if that makes sense. So even though more tokens might be issued, the value of the token should still be going up always, is kind of like the design. So if the system grows very quickly, there will be more issuance put into the system. But if the growth slows down, the issuance will also go down. Okay. But the issuance is always designed to be sub the growth, meaning that from your perspective, in terms of what you can buy with the token, it's always deflationary. Meaning tomorrow you should be able to buy more than you did today as long as the system is growing, right? And so what that does is what you're trying to do in this like adoption that's like quote unquote fair, where it's not sort of like arbitrary for the early guys, is you're trying to manifest what's called a logistics function. So it's kind of like this S shape where it like starts here, and then like you get growth, you get adoption, and then you kind of saturate the market, and then it kind of like tapers out when you sort of get your
S curve. Is that what you're?
It's an S curve.
An S curve, yeah.
Yeah. It's what's called the logistics, and if you integrate a logistics, you get a normal distribution. But this is like a well-known like phenomenon with adoption of network-based systems. So what we've done is we basically constructed a thing that should manifest an S curve of issuance if you get an S curve of adoption. The thing is, we don't know how fast that S curve will take place.
Yeah.
So instead of just like trying to prescribe an arbitrary time to it, we're saying it adapts to what manifests. So the issuance is path dependent, but it's meant to always create deflation for the current holders.
Very interesting. This is fascinating stuff. Fascinating. Oh, wow.
So ultimately, you don't have a fixed supply, but you have a design which is meant to make the holding of Quai deflationary for the holders.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So we're not going to like the extreme of the Bitcoin model where you get
which
like
is absolute scarcity. Is that what you're saying? Or like the inflation rate going down?
The inflation rate is still going down in the system, but
so the Quai inflation rate 10 years from now is going to be much less. Is that part of the system design? But it never, could it potentially just be?
It should always approach. In the long run, inflation rate will still always go to zero, right? Because there's like a finite number of humans like on the planet.
Yeah.
But
there's no mathematical hard cap on Quai.
Correct. Correct.
Okay. Like Ethereum is similar that there's no mathematical hard cap, but they're like supposedly the supply issuance keeps going down. Is that accurate for Quai as well, or will it go through inflationary periods as if there's like tons of people that are using it?
Well, so let's be careful about the term inflation and deflation. So when we talk about deflation, you're actually saying that your growth is greater than the growth in the demand is greater than the growth in the supply.
Okay,
that creates a deflationary environment. If your growth in supply is greater than your growth in demand, that creates an inflationary environment. So even if you have the total number of tokens going up, that can still create a deflationary environment. So the supply is still increasing. It's just increasing sub-demand. So it becomes deflationary, if that makes sense. So what we're basically saying is that to get the optimal distribution of money, so it's most broadly adopted, you don't want to create an arbitrary emissions curve. You want to create a curve which can dynamically adapt to the rate at which the system is adopted.
Okay, so I guess what you're saying, but I guess what you're saying is that, like, the Keynesians and the current status quo, the government will argue that they don't want it to be arbitrary, so because they, obviously they can print it whenever they feel like it, or if there's ever a crisis or whatever, and they just, close their eyes and say, we think this might be a good idea, and we're just going to do it, right? But Quai's issuance can change, but it's not so much decided by just random decisions. It's kind of based.
It's based off the market, technically.
It's based off of mathematics that have been coded into the issuance of the supply. Well, it's based on the market.
So there's like a rule, which determines the issuance.
I got you.
But the market determines the curve.
Okay. Gotcha.
So like it can go up or down, or like accelerate the curve or slow down the curve, which will ultimately change like where the supply is at any given point in time. But the rules are coded, and then the market participants in terms of like how many people choose to mine, how many people choose to do transactions, like what the market discovers the price of Quai to be, kind of all play into the issuance rate.
So let me do a thought experiment here. So say that the network has low adoption right now, and there's not a lot of demand. That means that the inflation will be less right now.
That's right.
And then as we get more participants and more people coming in, potentially the inflation could go up.
Well, I would say it this way. The issuance rate could go up.
That's what I'm asking. Yeah.
But the deflation, or the gap between the demand and the supply would always be deflationary. Is the idea.
Okay.
So as like a holder, right? The way this kind of works is the sort of network value. We use Metcalfe's law, which uses this concept of
network effects. Yeah,
a network effect, and it's basically n log n is kind of like what is like the value of a network. But the issuance of Quai is just log n, so you always have this factor of n in the system to make it so that the value of the network is always n times bigger than the issuance rate, if that makes sense. So you're still benefiting from being like early, so to speak, but we're doing it in a way that gives you a better distribution and allows a more dynamic issuance rate for adoption. Because like one of our goals in the system is to allow the system to grow as fast as the market will allow the system to grow. In some ways, Bitcoin sort of constrains its own growth by having a fixed halvening curve. Right? If Bitcoin was able to like dynamically adapt, it could potentially create a better issuance curve, because it could basically say,
I think the idea of better is kind of subjective, right? For what, trying to like unpack this philosophically,
Well, I can define better for you.
Okay, define better in your mind because
Yeah. So better is what is the quickest path to becoming a globally adopted money system. That's better.
Okay.
So I would argue that Bitcoin did not like program the optimal path to find that like growth rate.
I see what you're saying. For me, better, like when I think about it, when I think about Bitcoin, better for me is I know that this money is going to be the hardest money that I can put my life's energy in. So it's like a different. I'm looking at it like yes, I think it will be adopted more as time goes on, and who knows how fast. Maybe they could have optimized to make that happen faster. But for me, better is like, can I store my life's energy, my wealth in this money, and know with certainty the future inflation rate and issuance rate that is going to protect my purchasing power over time. I see what you're doing with Quai and how you're optimizing it and how you're thinking about other factors, and I think that's amazing and really cool, right? I think it's important to have multiple systems and try different ideas, and things can be optimized for different things, right? Like on the L1, like we've been playing around with Quai, like sending like funds like Venmo, essentially, like you show me how quickly you can use an app to just pay and like you get finality and settlement. Like that's amazing, right? Like Bitcoin can't do that on the L1. Like got to wait 10 minutes, whatever. I think both are useful and cool and have different value props. That's my take personally.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's definitely different value props for sure. When we do comparisons to Bitcoin, we're just doing it because it's the archetype.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily like saying it's wrong, but you're just using it as the archetypical post of comparison, right?
Yeah.
So
I don't even think you guys should be. I think your messaging should be more comparing to like Ethereum and some of these other protocols that you can do all this cool stuff on, because Quai now has ability to do all sorts of cool shit that like it does have monetary characteristics and qualities, and like what you're describing is super cool. Like I really am fascinated by looking at the Gini coefficient and thinking about issuance when there's demand and keeping it, using protocol rules to make it still like deflationary, I guess is how you would say it, like based off of the supply and demand. Super fucking cool. I'm all for it. Which brings me to my next question. How do you see Quai contributing to individual freedom and sovereignty in an increasingly surveillance-heavy digital world?
Great question. So fundamentally, right, when we say monetary system, what we're doing is we're trying to develop a system, not for the sake of developing the system, but to create one that's completely independent from fiat. Like that is fundamentally the point of Quai. So like when we started, I said it's a global monetary system. In that statement, it is saying that we want to build a system that allows you to defect from fiat, not have any dependencies on fiat, and never have to go back, no matter the macro environment.
Yeah. So
if you look at the system, there's two tokens in the system. We have Quai, which is EVM compatible. So like compare it to Ethereum, you can do cool stuff with it.
Yeah.
And then we have this other token, and it's deflationary. So you kind of have this expectation of values relative to deflationary systems with it. And then the second token is what we call Chi, which is an energy dollar. And basically we use the proof of work process to kind of also create an oracle by the miners that causes Chi to reflect the miners' energy costs. And that's why we call it an energy dollar.
We're going to unpack this on a future episode for sure. This is some more rabbit holes to go down.
For sure. But the thing with Chi is it fulfills the other two tenets in the system, which are the unit of account and the medium of exchange. And so when we talk about units of account, right now people are using USDC or USDT. 70% of all crypto transactions by value are happening in one of those entities, which is like tragic from the Cypherpunk'd perspective, because those entities are just receipts circulating on chain representing deposits in the fiat system, which the cryptocurrencies were supposed to like detach us from. And 70% of transactions by value are basically happening against bank deposits, again, denominated in dollars. So, that's bad just from an independent standpoint relative to the dollar. It doesn't like get you, off the risk curve. It puts you also into a custodial curve, or sort of a custodial risked environment. Right. So you're dependent on the dollar not inflating. You're dependent on the custodian not going under, or censoring your money, or stopping your transactions, or whatever might exist there, which sort of loses all of the properties that we like originally wanted crypto for, which is a pretty sad statement about like where crypto is. And then the other thing that happens is most of those are actually like circulating on Ethereum. So there's $200 billion worth of stable tokens now. And, Ethereum's had a few good weeks. So I think Ethereum's at like a $300 billion market cap. But
it is interesting to think about.
Because the stables are custodial bank deposits and it represents so much value on the chain, if there's ever like a change in the protocol that's contentious, let's say they want ubiquitous OFAC compliance. Seriously,
I know.
right?
No,
let's say like that's a rule, and the Treasury says we are going to enforce that these depositors, so the people that run USDC and USDT, if they want to continue having access to the banking system, must only allow transactions on a completely OFAC compliant chain. They can effectively get Ethereum because of the level of value circulating in those two assets on Ethereum to become fully OFAC compliant. So they can change the rules of Ethereum via the regulatory authority because so much of the value is in a depository institution which they regulate.
It would definitely, again, we talk about different degrees of decentralization and why decentralization is important, and these are all like, obviously that's something unlikely, but it's not impossible, right? What you described. I mean, it is.
I think it's inevitable.
You think it's inevitable? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I think they know I think they know that they have this trump card. They just haven't decided to exercise it, but they ultimately will. And maybe you'll never see it actuated, but the fact that like the issuers of Circle and the stakers and the exchanges like all know this,
I think this would.
You're going to get that like
I think this
de facto regulation without actually having them like play the full trump card. It's going to happen one way or the other.
I honestly think that level of Orwellian surveillance it would be so bad and catastrophic for the dollar itself. It would further make fiat. It would be so bad for them, like holistically, that they just won't do it. But the fact that they could do it is definitely concerning. And also, like, I'm not like, if a fiat currency is run well and not hyperinflated and stealing, if they don't steal from their citizens by massively printing the money, they always do. Like, I have no problem with fiat currency that's responsible and sound, but like, of course, they'll never do that. When I think about having all these other networks and things, it just allows a competition. It allows competing ideas, competing implementations. And like, I think that's super important, right? So like, if the Treasury wants to have people buying US debt and buying into their fiat system, well, they better not do any of that shit, because if they want dollars on chain, if they want people in third world countries to have access to dollar and do all that stuff, they better not do exactly what you just described, because that would literally like kill their whole business model, essentially being able to sell treasuries on chain, which I don't really see any other treasury buyers. Like, if we don't get this stablecoin legislation passed in the US, I really don't think that, I think it really does spell the end of the fiat system, like maybe not immediately, but like on a long-term time horizon, as we move to a more multipolar world. Right now, the last best thing that the government even has right now to be able to sell treasuries is the stable coins on chain, and letting like people bypass their governments and go straight to just buying, getting dollar exposure, like fiat exposure on chain. But, I like the idea of all these things competing in a free market. I just really, to me, it's like, I'm not like, obviously I see what they've done with the fiat system, and not having any competition, I think, is horrible. And they've gotten away with fucking murder, printing trillions and doing all this bullshit that they do. But like, the future I see is like, you want to have a fiat currency? Well, you better fucking provide some benefits. You better actually, you're not just gonna be able to steal from people anymore, because they have other options. They can buy Quai, they can buy Chi, they can buy Quai, they can buy Bitcoin, they can buy Ethereum, they can use Solana, they can use stuff like DAI, which is a stable coin, but it's not. It's interesting.
Well,
interesting.
Old school DAI was like algorithmic. Like new school DAI is a lot more custodial. If you've seen how they've evolved.
I haven't seen how they've evolved it, but isn't it backed by other assets? I mean, I don't understand the full. I haven't gone in the rabbit hole on it.
It's a lot more of a custodial asset now than it is like, it has like a reserve and everything.
But the reserve is crypto assets, right?
Yeah, but like it's like USDT and USDC. So I
thought it was ETH and some other stuff.
No. Well, no. So like ETH was the original like collateralized asset, but because it's very volatile relative to the dollar. There's like issues around that.
But you could like there was like lending against it, or like I don't understand all. I mean, it's deep down a deep.
That's like a whole nother side road to go down. But I guess the point here is, regardless of what you think the sort of time frame or the regulatory
Yeah.
imposition will happen on stablecoins and how severe it will be, you can recognize that they have a large degree of control through either soft or explicit regulatory power in either case. So my statement is that if you want to have an independent system, you need to have a stablecoin alternative which is not linked to fiat. And so that's why it's important to have a unit of account that's native to the system but isn't referential to fiat. And that's why we introduced Qi. And then the other part about Qi is that it functions as a medium of exchange. So Qi, unlike Quai, is based on an account-based system. Qi is based off a UTXO-based ledger. It has fixed denominations. We enforce non-address reuse per block.
I saw a couple of videos about you talking about that, and we'll go down that rabbit hole in another episode.
But
it requires a lot of unpacking.
There's a couple other features to it. The upshot is it has cash-like privacy properties. So Qi not only is a unit of account, it's also a medium of exchange. And with a medium of exchange that has cash-like privacy properties, you can help improve individual freedom because they're able to economically express themselves without risks of censorship or confiscation.
Yeah. As we close out this episode, any other things you want to highlight regarding Quai? Why is now the right time to build Quai, to have Quai released? What technological or social developments have made your approach viable today? Whereas maybe like 5 to 10 years ago, it wasn't possible.
Well, ultimately, it took me 7 years to figure out how to scale a proof of work system.
Yeah.
Like in aggregate. Fundamentally, what I see within like Web3 is that some 99% of projects are not good. And of that subset that are good, there's a vast majority which aren't servicing the needs of creating a system that enhances individual freedom. So there's kind of two paths that we're going down. We're going to a world of digital money. Like that is going to happen, save for a corona mass ejection that like takes out the grid and we go back to the Stone Age. But save for that.
What would you say? What did you call it?
A coronal mass ejection, so CME.
Was you talking about from the sun?
Yeah.
But what about like, wouldn't half the Earth not be affected by that because it's away from the sun?
It depends on how long it lasts for.
Oh, you think it could last for a full rotation?
It can last, yeah.
Wow, I've never even heard of that. How often does that happen?
So there was something called the Carrington event, and they statistically happen every 150 years, and the last one I think was like 160 years ago.
Really?
Yeah.
And you think that that would last for long enough to totally let the Earth rotate and wipe out the entire
it could
everything?
It could, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
What about like the stuff that like the satellites and stuff that have like solar shielding and all that stuff on them now that broadcast the internet and do all that?
I mean
it wouldn't destroy everything for sure, but
the DOE did an assessment of this, and they said if they had a Carrington level event, it would wipe out the electrical grid for up to 2 years, and in the interim period, they think that 90% of the U.S. population would die.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Oh yeah, this is like one of the long tails, man.
So the last time this happened was 160 years ago.
Yeah, and it's statistically supposed to happen every 150 years.
So what do we have? So 160 years ago when it happened, did it really affect things, or did we just not have that developed? That like
we didn't really have it, but like it was noticed for like telegraph operators.
Okay, gotcha.
But like that was it.
But the Carrington, when you say Carrington event, the one that happened probably wasn't very severe. You're saying that?
No, that level of event, if it happened today, it would like wipe all modern technologies out.
Really?
Yeah.
How would that happen? Like, explain to me.
Well, so basically a CME causes the induction of like a very high impulse magnetic field, which then induces high voltages in anything that's conductive. So like any microcontroller circuits just get like 1,000,000 volts induced into them and then they just fry.
But like, obviously we'd have a little bit of advance notice of this. This wouldn't just hit us. We detect it.
No.
Wouldn't we have a little bit of time to detect it from the sun?
No, it travels at the speed of light.
Yeah,
so like
gotcha.
when it hits us, we know about it.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Damn. So anything that's not plugged in or connected would be fine, right? I know I'm taking you.
No, because it's just a magnetic field. So if you have a conductor, like it will get voltage induced if you put it in the field.
What do you mean if you put it in the field?
So like you're going to get a transient magnetic field that like sweeps across the earth.
Okay.
So unless you shield from that magnetic field, like in a Faraday cage.
Uh-huh.
Like even though your phone isn't plugged into the wall, like it has conductors in it. So like those conductors will cause voltage to get induced from the change in the magnetic.
But like, what if you're in a building or something like that? Will that reduce some of the effect because you've got, like a steel?
Well, unless it's like a perfect Faraday cage. But
I mean,
if
not
it's
perfect, but like, what if it's mostly good? What if it's like?
I think it has to be pretty perfect.
It has to be pretty perfect. Do we have backup infrastructure that's protected by that, just in case of emergencies? Or
no?
What about like? God, that's crazy.
So to wrap up the statement, I guess, is ultimately I think we're going down the path of digital money.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, as I observe what systems have been built and what is being adopted, I think it lacks the characteristics for enhancing individual freedom and liberty in a digital world. And so the goal with Quai is to create a system that is resilient against nation-state attackers. To accomplish that, you not only need to use proof of work, but you need to do it at a scale that's meaningful, so you can ultimately use it transactionally, get a degree of social resilience in the system. And you have to generate enough revenue that it doesn't make economic sense for the existing powers to attack it. And you have to have privacy, and you have to have a system that's completely independent of fiat. So the whole goal here is to create a resilient system against the world's most wealthy attackers that can basically replace them and allow money that is focused on individuals and freedom.
I think that's a great ending point, and I think that's a major gives me major cypherpunk vibe. So I love it. I love to hear it. I think it's a big part of the cypherpunk mission, all of the things that you described. So I think let's wrap here, and then we'll be back on the next episode to discuss merge mining, hierarchical structures, proof of entropy minima, and all sorts of stuff along those lines. So,
sounds great.
Thanks.